This one is from Dave from Indianapolis, and he's wondering, when this correction takes place, he's wondering how ugly you guys think it'll be. So he says his question is, what does it look like on the other side? Should everyone have a cave full of supplies that will last their family a couple of years? Or is it over in 90 days? Or do you think the banksters just blow up the whole thing because they can't run it anymore? And I guess we can start with Chris.
Yeah, I've talked about this many times. I think that things will be bad, but I don't think it's going to be equally bad everywhere all at once. I think it's going to be felt mostly in the areas that have benefited the most from the current paradigm, and when the paradigm collapses, they're the ones that are going to be least able to handle it. So I would give you the example of where I used to live. I used to live in the New York, New Jersey area. I mean, that's a megalopolis that's highly dependent upon capital flowing in from not only all over the country but also all over the world into the financial center of New York City and Wall Street. That then spreads throughout all the local economies with the government. Taxes, the real estate, the spending in the restaurants, the theater district, and all the ancillary things that further and further away from the central hub of Wall Street. And when you look at the physicality of what New York City is, the dollar collapse would lead to an ability of you have highly aggressive people who it takes to live in such a competitive environment, who are suddenly going to be without their life savings, suddenly without their ability of making an income in an area where they're jam-packed with other highly aggressive people. And we have a systemic failure that would essentially shut off the capital, the food, the electricity, the water into those areas. I mean, how else would it turn out other than just a complete mess? And while it may take a couple days for it to settle out, and depending on what time of year it takes, things are going to get very ugly. And my big suggestion is to, if you live there, I hope you're very friendly or have a way of aggressing out of that area, because I think Hurricane Sandy was a good example of how ill-prepared people are. I mean, people didn't even have gas cans. They had to use milk jugs to go get gas, and when the gas was shut off, things got ugly. And that was still under the illusion the belief that somebody was going to come save them. But I tell you what, during a currency crisis, it's going to be every man for themselves. And there is no survivor or no saviors coming in, no cavalry. You're going to see a breakdown of the governments. Do I think things would be better out into the areas of the country that are less dependent upon it, the boring parts of the country, the poorer parts of the country? I would think that those people would be more resilient because they've been through tough times even when the economy has been good. I mean, you look at the poverty out in the countryside, it's because the wealth has been continually sucked from those areas. And you got people who only can rely upon what they can create with their hands and the people that they know. And that's just the United States. I mean, I think a lot of nations are going to fare better. I think nations that don't benefit from this petrodollar standard are going to thrive on the other side of it because they're preparing, to live without the dollar now. I give you Iran, I think, is a perfect example. They were essentially kicked out of the SWIFT system, I think, in 2011. And all these sanctions came on, and while it's been very difficult for the Iranian government to adjust, and they had a mild hyperinflation there with the rial, it's actually strengthened them to the point now that they're dealing with other nations out there that are trading with gold and oil and wheat and all these major things, and they're now better prepared for a dollar collapse because they've been without the dollar. The same thing with Russia. Putin has been asking, I think over last summer said that they could not have any investments in real estate and the stocks for the people that were inside the government. In dollar status, and they've been slowly selling off their dollar holdings and buying gold. They're going to be better off on the other side of it. You look at the comparative size of the GDP of California and Russia, and in a dollar paradigm, they're about the same. But I tell you what, don't tell me that the GDP of Russia and California are the same when it comes to a post-dollar world where Russia has vast resources nuclear weapons and financial ties with the strongest economy, China. Whereas, the California economy, what's that built off of? Movies and, iPhones and breast implants. Like that to me is not a competitive economy, but in a dollar paradigm, they're one and the same. And I think in a post paradigm, I think California is going to suffer tremendously, especially Southern California. You're going to see water wars and all decentralization of power. You may see drug lords owning parts of Southern California simply because they're the most responsive and powerful, centralized force there. So I don't know. My overall answer is not going to be equally bad everywhere all at once, and you better be cognizant of where you are. Consciously. Are you surrounded by aggressive people? Are you in an area where you cannot physically defend yourself, or even allowed to defend yourself? I mean, geez, try owning a gun in New York City. Good luck. That was one of the best things about moving out to Ohio is building up a small armory, out here and doing it cheaply.
Yeah, and California's economy is built on, yes, movies, an historic drought, which is only getting worse. And of course, unlike Russia, which only has a 14% debt to GDP, California, just the municipality of California has $400 billion of debt, not including all of the smaller municipalities. So again, California is probably the worst place to be. And I couldn't agree more with Chris, being that I too am from New York, and I moved to the suburbs of Denver 7 years ago, in large part for that very reason, partially the cost of living and a better lifestyle, but also because I didn't want to be in a major population center that's fueled by Wall Street money at the worst possible time. And when people say, well, how ugly will it be? Again, that's the secular American mindset that it's just America. America's got 300 million people. The rest of the world has 7 billion people. We are seeing right now around the world the ugliness that it will be here. Think about living in Russia right now, in Venezuela, in parts of the Middle East, even in places like Turkey. Heck, some of the other BRICS. Right now you have a record low currency for the South African rand. For the Indian rupee is near its low. The ruble is near its low, and these are supposedly the leaders of the world right here. So we're seeing all kinds of inflation and deflationary forces ripping apart the world right now. And if not for the quote safety of the dollar and its reserve status because it's so liquid, it would be a lot worse here. But the fact is, it is pretty bad here. It just hasn't gotten to the point yet of some of these other countries because we are at the top of the totem pole with our reserve currency. It's a cancer that strikes first at the limbs and then it goes all the way up and it kills the brain. That's what the US dollar is. So it will get awful ugly when it eventually gets to us. But as it is here, I mean, we have record low real employment. We have record low real nominal wages. Our rights are being taken away. The dollar has lost so much purchasing power over the years, et cetera, et cetera. So it's already pretty bad here. But once the reserve currency status starts to break, it's going to be worse here than anyone else. And that's why you really need to be careful about preparing yourself for, hoping it's not a worst case scenario, but assuming that it will be.
Now, this question is very similar. It's about moving to a large city or a smaller town. This viewer wants to know, if you lived in a very large city, would you move to a smaller town or rent a home in the large city? Or would it be better to sell all and buy extra real estate to rent where you reallocate? I am concerned with not finding work in small towns and not even earning much from operating my own business. Chris, did you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I mean, because I actually did that. And so May of 2008, I basically walked away from my family business, which was in the retail sector. And, I did it because of many reasons, but mainly because I felt the consumer economy was going to fall apart. And here I was tied to, partners and debt that did not want to move. And so I ended up walking away from everything and leaving nothing. I cannot possibly stress this. Moving your family is a very difficult thing to do, especially when you're the only one seeing the stuff that's coming. If you're a single guy, that's one thing, but moving a wife and kids and under the belief that, the economy is going to crash and we got to move out to the country, you're going to end up causing so much stress in your family. It's probably not worth it. And then, given the fact that even his concerns moving out to an area, you're right. There are not, the kind of jobs that you'd be used to, and it takes time to develop even the network of friends that it would take to even find work. Even if you work for yourself, it's difficult establishing yourself because there is a certain level of trust that needs to be there. If you do have friends and family, and I call the boring parts of the country, you can consider doing that. As far as buying and renting and doing all that other stuff, I can tell you my own experience. I mean, I sold all my property in the height of the bubble in 2005, and I rented for those final 3 years that I was in New Jersey, and that was a smart move. As the times get tough, real estate's going to be the least liquid asset to have, and that's not something I would want to do. And then, as far as buying real estate elsewhere and stuff, I mean, these are all factors that they're big. I would suggest, if you do have precious metals, don't store it where you live. If you do have friends and family that live in the boring parts of the world, I would pre-position all those kind of supplies and wealth with them, provided that there are people that you can really trust, out to the areas that you're going to go to. Because if we do have this cataclysmic collapse where everything starts falling apart, the last thing you want to do is have the stress of moving, your family in that environment, much less everything you own. That's really dangerous proposition, and something that you got to consider. There's a lot of factors. I mean, I used to do hour-long strategy sessions with people just talking about these things. But there's a lot of factors that go into this, and is not one to be taken lightly.
Yeah, look, I wrote an article a few years ago. Sorry if I say that a lot, but I write an article every day, so I have a lot of articles. But I did one about 3 years ago called Protection Continuum, and it's kind of like it addresses all these kind of questions. People say, well, if this is going to happen, of course, we don't know exactly what will happen. What should I do? And basically it says, look, everyone has their own specific life to deal with, which includes, as Chris mentions, your family considerations, your job, how fearful you are. Do you think there's going to be war or martial law or civil unrest, et cetera, et cetera? So you have to decide what's best for you and just go with it. And the way I put it, a 1 on that protection continuum scale means move into Manhattan and put all your cash in Citibank. And a 10 on the scale means move to a desert island, bury gold in the sand, and forage for food. So again, it's not easy to make these decisions, but there's no right decision. You just have to do what you consider is the best you could possibly do to have the best peace of mind going forward. And I mean, I do a lot, obviously, given what I am. I do a lot to, quote, prep myself for what's coming. But there are people who do far more than what I do. And the best example, kind of what motivated was, Bill Holter, who works with us here at Miles Franklin back in, I think it was 05 or 06. He actually moved out of the country to Costa Rica because he expected a crash, kind of like what we had in 2008. So he was right on that. But after living there for a few years and learning enough Spanish, he realized that the people there hate Americans. Mm-hmm. And so he came back to America because he thought it was probably safer than being outside the country. So again, there's no real answer to these things. You just have to be very careful in your due diligence process and make sure not to fool yourself in the process.
And if I can make one last point to this, if you find yourself getting emotional about it and whatever solution you think, don't do it, because that's when you start working on fear, and that's when you start to get manipulated. I can't tell you how many people get into this kind of paranoia mindset, and then they find themselves looking for double passports and citizenship and gulch here and all that other stuff, and they end up wasting time and money instead of thinking about this. If you are truly afraid of a collapse, I would much rather be in the hinterlands of the United States than anywhere else in the world with any passport, with any government, with anything else, simply because you're of the same race. I would never want to be that gringo outside of the country when it becomes cool to hate on the dollar. I would tell people to take time about it. Take small steps. You don't have to do everything all at once. It's not like you have to sell the house and do what I did. I mean, geez, my poor wife. I sold the house and went in all in on gold and silver. in 2005 and then rented and, all that other stuff. It can cause a lot of problems. The best thing to do is to do something, a little bit every day, and you'll find yourself becoming more confident in the decisions that you make, and you repeat the stuff that you feel most gratified with, and move forward that way, and just do pieces at the time, because we don't know when this is going to happen or how bad it's going to get or where it's going to be. I find the thought of even moving to different places is a little difficult, because you don't know where the next bad spot is. I mean, you look at what happened out in Ferguson. I mean, geez, that's in the middle of the country, and you got race riots out there. You don't know the particularities of certain regions and stuff like that. So, just try to do this on a more logical step instead of getting all hyped up emotionally.
Yeah, or even Paris for that matter. I mean, there's issues around the world, and a lot of the issues that are going on around the world, Americans don't even realize they're there. For instance, that there's a major, Islamic versus white, kind of thing going on in Europe, and people in America don't even realize it. So there's a lot of problems that you won't understand because it's not part of your world. So in a lot of ways, Bill just, figured the devil I know is better than the devil I don't know. And as Chris said, certainly you'd rather be where there's less people than in the middle of Manhattan.
All right. Well, Andy Hoffman and Chris Twain, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. Before we let you go, did you guys each want to, share with our viewers where they can find you and any last thoughts you had? And I guess we can start with Andy.
Sure. MilesFranklin.com. We've been in business now since 1989. Just call us 800-822-8080 or email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
I finally, after many of these interviews and trying to point people to all these different places, I had the YouTube channels, blogs, books, all this other stuff. I finally consolidated everything this year into silvershieldexchange.com. You can see the auction site, the new coins, the articles, and you can also sign up for my weekly podcast that I send out to my members. So silvershieldexchange.com.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, thank you.
And thank you, Elijah.
This video was brought to you by ReluctantPreppers.com. Click here to watch Reluctant Prepper's latest interview with John Rubino. In this interview, John Rubino explains how we can't stop the economic collapse. All we can do is protect our families. Now for a clip from the interview.
We cannot change the political aspect of this. We can't stop the debt buildup because that's happening at levels that even the president can't stop. It doesn't matter who's in charge, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, we're still going to borrow more money year after year after year. And that's the main trend that we really have to worry about, because at a certain point debt becomes totally debilitating, and we're there now. We're in most of the world at the point where we already can't ever pay off what we've got, and we're continuing to borrow more money. So it works the same way for a country as it does for a family. When you're in that situation and you don't stop digging yourself out of your hole, then you set the stage for some kind of really horrendous collapse. And so that's where we are. And so for individuals, for us, we basically have to think in terms of the world being unchangeable. We can't fix it. We can't stop it. All we can do is protect ourselves and our family.